Discovered. The incredible truth that changed everything. My son never expected this surprise. Tom wiped the sweat from his brow, the pungent tang of engine grease clinging to him like a second skin. Another rain-soaked afternoon. The rhythm of raindrops echoing in the old garage felt oddly comforting yet oppressive. He could use the distraction. The weariness of raising his son alone weighed heavier with each passing year. Jake, at 16, had become a ghost in the halls of Lincoln High, fading into the shadows next to classmates excelling in sports and academics. Tom's hands, calloused from years of work, were a testament to resilience. But this resilience felt hollow when he saw the doubt etched on Jake's face. "Let's get this cleaned up," Tom suggested, motioning to the pile of forgotten tools in the corner. They spent hours throwing away rusted nuts and bolts when Jake stumbled upon a box, a battered, weather-beaten treasure. Tom's heart raced with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, fearing the emotional exposure it might unleash. The moment Jake pried it open, the scent of old paper engulfed them, revealing letters from his grandfather, a name Tom knew all too well. But the reality of who he was didn't match Jake's dimly lit memory. "What's this?" Jake asked, eyebrows knitting together in confusion. Each letter unfolded a legacy of groundbreaking scientific discovery that sparked a flame of admiration within Jake, but Tom felt an unsettling pressure build. Could he ever measure up to this legacy? The wheels of fate spun wildly as Jake's expression shifted from confusion to awe, awakening a glimpse of potential Tom had longed to see. "Are you okay?" Jake's voice cut through Tom's racing thoughts. Tom's breath hitched as he faced his son, a storm of emotions swirling inside him. Pride mingled with fear, a deep anxiety that perhaps the world had set Jake up for disappointment. Would he be able to navigate the expectations placed upon him? Just as Tom gathered himself, Jake's excitement surged. "I think I want to try the science competition," he declared, his voice cracking with determination. Before they could celebrate, a familiar doubt clawed at Tom. What if Jake would face ridicule? How could he protect him from the scornful whispers of peers and faculty who deemed him the mechanic's son? It wasn't just Jake's burgeoning ambition on the line. It was the unyielding fear of letting down the very essence of his role as a father. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the competition loomed closer, the weight of anticipation crushed down on Jake. With every improvement in grades came whispers from classmates dismissing his efforts, attributing progress to luck rather than talent. Tom felt the sting of indignation. He was fighting for his son's identity in a battle against the biases of their small town. A fight he had to lead for both of them. Jake began to withdraw, wrestling with his newfound ambitions against the suffocating fear of being exposed as a fraud. Sitting on the edge of the workbench, Jake's hands trembled, the weight of expectations pressing heavily on his shoulders. Tom reached out, desperately wanting to ease his son's fears. But the words tangled in his throat like the rusted bolts they had thrown away. Was Jake truly capable of stepping into this legacy? Or had he merely lived in its shadow? The clock was ticking, mere days left before the competition. A reminder that clarity was just a breath away, or yet another disappointment looming over them. Tom's heart pounded in the suffocating silence, and he finally uttered, "You can do this." But deep inside, he was only hoping he was right. What if the world had already judged Jake as unworthy? The rain had let up, leaving a damp chill in the air that seeped into the garage. Tom leaned against the workbench, fingers tracing the outlines of the tools, each one a device of creation or repair. But today they felt more like silent witnesses to his internal turmoil. Jake was lost in thought, the weight of his decision hanging heavily between them. Tom felt an undeniable urge to inspire something in his son, to ignite the fire of ambition without letting fear extinguish it. "Let's work on a project together," Tom suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. An initiative intended to bridge the distance between father and son. It aimed to envelop Jake in hands-on learning. "We can build something simple. Maybe a model rocket? It'll be fun." Jake looked up, skeptical. "Like, for the science competition?" "Exactly," Tom replied, his enthusiasm growing as he envisioned the potential of rekindling their connection. "You can design it. I'll help you put it together. We can even use your grandfather's letters for inspiration." For a fleeting moment, Jake's shoulders eased. A mixture of hope and disbelief flickered across his face. But as quickly as it appeared, the doubt returned like a shadow, creeping back to engulf his spirit. "But what if I mess up? Messing up is part of learning," Tom reassured him. The irony of that thought struck him as he echoed the lesson he needed to embrace himself. "What do you think your grandfather would say about that?" As Tom's words settled in the air, Jake's shoulders straightened slightly, and he cracked the faintest smile. There was a glimmer of trust forming, perhaps the first crack in the armor Jake had built around himself. They began working side by side, Tom showing Jake how to measure and cut plastic tubing, while explaining the physics behind flight. For the first time in months, laughter filled the garage as mistakes became jokes, and ideas morphed into tangible creations. Yet even amidst the budding camaraderie, Tom wrestled with the nagging thought of whether his son could really take the next step into competition, into a world where judgment lurked behind every corner. Days passed, and each evening found them immersed in their project. Yet one thing remained. The championship deadline loomed like a dark cloud. The closer they got, the more Tom noticed Jake retreating into silence, his excitement dulled by the anticipation of judgment. In moments where they would typically share laughs, Jake's gaze often drifted to the old letters scattered across the workbench, each word a reminder of a legacy that seemed insurmountable. In one of those quiet evenings, as Tom organized sketches and notes around the garage, he stole a glance at Jake, who sat motionless, staring blankly at his designs. "What's going on in that mind of yours, buddy?" Jake sighed, pushing a pencil across the paper. "What if I fail? What if I'm just a mechanic's son who can't measure up?" Those words crashed into Tom like a wave, pushing him into a whirlwind of memories from his own youth. Fearful decisions, missed opportunities, and a yearning to prove himself worthy. "You're so much more than just a title, Jake. You can't let fears dictate your potential. You're meant to explore the skies, not just repair the ground beneath them." The softest tremor of belief flickered in Jake's eyes, pulling Tom closer to an epiphany not just for his son, but for himself. He needed to break free from the rusted confines of his fears as well. Perhaps it wasn't just about proving oneself, but about embracing the journey to uncover new truths, even in vulnerability. With the competition just days away, Tom felt the overwhelming urgency rise within him. What if we focused on what happens after you fail? Instead of being afraid of judgment, what if we envisage growth on the other side? Just as light began to penetrate the fog of doubt, Jake's expression shifted, not quite settled yet into resolution, but stirred by an optimistic braid of emotions. The time was coming to face not only the competition, but the fears that shadowed them. Tom understood that this journey wasn't solely about rockets or accolades. It was about two souls poised for transformation. As they stood, surrounded by the remnants of their effort, Tom realized the most important project they were constructing wasn't a model, but a framework for resilience. Striding forward, He felt the ground beneath him shift, a subtle but sustainable conviction. Whatever unfolded, both he and Jake would discover the strength to embrace it. And just when that conviction was bolstered by their budding partnership, an unexpected knock shattered their moment. Tom instinctively walked toward the garage door, apprehension flooding his veins. The knock echoed ominously, a sound that felt out of place in their productive cocoon. His heart raced with uncertainty, every beat a reminder of the vulnerabilities they were now beginning to confront together. As he pulled the door open, the cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Standing outside was Barry, their next-door neighbor, his face pale and eyes wide with urgency. "Tom, you need to come quick. It's about Jake." The words struck like a lightning bolt, shattering the fragile sense of growth and confidence that had begun to blossom between father and son. "What happened?" Tom demanded, panic twisting in his stomach, pushing aside the reasonable thought that Barry was exaggerating. "Just come. It's better to see for yourself." Barry gestured for Tom to follow him, urgency pressing down like a heavy weight, amplifying every doubt Tom had tried to cast off. Adrenaline spurred him into action as he quickly motioned for Jake to join him. They trailed behind Barry, the path to the neighbor's house a blur of looming fears. What could have happened? Jake's face mirrored Tom's growing anxiety. Small flecks of uncertainty darted through his previously budding confidence. They reached Barry's living room, where a small group of parents had gathered, hushed whispers filling the air with a palpable tension. Tom's instincts warned him that this was no trivial matter. As they crossed the threshold, Jake clutched Tom's hand tighter. "Sit down," Barry urged, his voice trembling slightly. The atmosphere was thick with apprehension, leaving Tom and Jake standing in a surreal limbo. "Is this about the competition?" Tom ventured, his voice steady, despite the internal storm brewing. He scanned the room, searching for familiar faces, seeking answers in the reactions around him. "No, it's not that," a woman spoke up, breaking the silence. "We just heard that someone—" She hesitated, glancing at Jake. "Said something about you at school, Jake. It's gone viral, and it's not good." Confusion morphed rapidly across Jake's face, darkening into a heavy frown. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" "They're saying you can't build the rocket. They've made fun of you." The woman's voice lost its tentative edge, becoming sharply accusatory. Tom's chest tightened, a threatening wave of anger and protectiveness rising within him. "Kids can be cruel, but you know that's not true, Jake," he interjected, feeling the distance between him and his son stretch again, just as the past days of connection had begun to solidify. "What if it is?" Jake replied, the vulnerable edge of defeat creeping back into his tone. "What if I'm just a joke?" Tom's heart sank, recognizing how deeply the weight of external judgment bore on his son. Instead of the potential for empowerment he had envisioned when they started the rocket project, fear once again threatened to suffocate Jake's spirit. It was an old story, one he had rehearsed in his own trials and tribulations. The faces of the gathering turned toward Jake, full of curiosity, but absent of compassion. Tom could see the judgment forming in their stares, eyes filled with assumptions about the mechanic's son, the boy who undoubtedly could not carry a legacy. He felt sick. This was not a lesson about resilience. It was a confrontation with the harsh reality of societal expectations and the burdens they carried. How could anyone think that? "You've been working so hard, Jake. Remember how much you learned?" Tom grasped for every positive moment between them, hoping to build a fortress against the taunting voices. Yet, as he surveyed Jake's face, he realized the walls of his own fears were clashing with his aspirations to teach vulnerability. That knock had unraveled everything, bringing to the surface not just Jake's struggle, but the deep channels of Tom's fears regarding acceptance and judgment, both from his peers and within himself. In that moment of shared vulnerability, Tom made a choice. It would no longer just be about the rocket. It would be a lesson in defiance against their fears. This is not the end. Let's show everyone who you are, Jake. Let's build this rocket, not just for the competition, but so you know what you're capable of. As determination flickered within Tom's heart, a weight lifted off Jake's shoulders momentarily, igniting a flicker of rebellion in his eyes. Will you really help me, Dad? Jake's voice was steadier now, a slight hope gleaming through the cracks of insecurity. More than ever, Tom replied, a fierce resolve igniting in his spirit as he plotted their next steps. Yet, as he turned back to face the crowd, Tom would soon have to confront not only external opinions, but his own lingering doubts about what true success and failure would mean. And in that tense, significant moment, the question loomed large in Tom's mind. Would they rise together, or would the weight of fear pull them back into the shadows? Tom took a deep breath, absorbing the gravity of his words. The room around him felt stifling, each whisper a reminder of the judgment looming closer. Turning his back on the stairs, he focused solely on Jake, his son's uncertainty radiating an intensity that made Tom's stomach churn. "Let's get to work," Tom said, determination piercing through his own doubts. He felt the weight of unspoken fears, not just for Jake, but for his own inadequacies as a father. Could he truly guide Jake through this? The challenges ahead weren't merely technical, they were emotional, requiring fortitude and resilience. He wasn't sure they both possessed. Walking back home, Tom's mind raced with potential strategies. They needed not only to complete the rocket, but to transform this incident into a catalyst for growth. Their resolve would be tested, and they would face more than their share of skepticism. But doubts had to be acknowledged in order to conquer them. "Dad." Jake's voice pierced the tension-filled silence between them. "What if I fail? What if I can't even finish it?" Tom turned to Jake. The boy looked so small, so fragile under the weight of the world that seemed bent on crushing him. In that moment, Tom recognized how much his own fears had influenced Jake's perspective, seeing failure as the end rather than a lesson. "It's okay to be afraid," Tom began, choosing his words carefully. "But you can't let fear dictate your actions. Failed attempts are just steps along the way to achieving something meaningful." Jake slowed, his brow furrowed in thought. "But what if everyone just laughs anyway?" "They probably will at first," Tom acknowledged, choosing honesty over comfort. "But think about it. They'll be laughing now, but we'll show them what determination looks like. When you finish that rocket, they won't just see the achievements. They'll see you." As they reached the garage, Tom activated the overhead light, illuminating the workspace filled with tools and materials for the rocket. He felt an overwhelming surge of nostalgia, recalling the hours he spent here after work, tinkering with machines, chasing dreams that had once felt out of reach. "Let's write down what we need first," Tom suggested, focusing on practical steps. They settled into a pattern. Tom measured, Jake scribbled down ideas, layers of their father-son bond reweaving through shared goals. With every measurement taken, every adjustment made, they were no longer just battling external voices, but harnessing their resolve to rebuild spirits. As they worked, Tom noticed moments where fear threatened to bubble up in Jake again. He was cautious, unsure of his own abilities, feelings that were all too relatable to Tom. The holistic lessons about resilience he had hoped to impart were now more salient than ever. He was teaching Jake how to embrace challenges, but the paradox stung. Teaching was often a two-way journey. When they paused for a break, Jake suddenly fixed his gaze on his father. "What if it doesn't work?" Tom swallowed hard, faced with the vulnerability of that question. It echoed his own doubts. He had wrestled with the notion of failure many times. "Then we'll build another one, and another. Progress doesn't come from doing it right the first time. It comes from getting back up. A flicker of understanding washed over Jake's features. There's strength in adaptability, Tom thought, recognizing that both he and his son were growing in this partnership. But beneath the surface, Tom knew this journey would demand more than just engineering skills. Communicating resilience, battling societal judgments, and encouraging Jake to boldly step forward would require the utmost dedication and strength of character. With a plan forming, Tom grappled with his own shadows. What would it take to confront his most profound fears? The judgment of their neighbors might become stifling, and every smile could mask mocking laughter. But giving in would not be an option, not for him, or for Jake. As they resumed their work, the echo of doubt lingered in their minds. The rocket wasn't just a project. It was a battleground for self-discovery, empowerment, and ultimately, confronting the idols of fear that loomed larger than life itself. And as the evening sun dipped towards the horizon, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge lay ahead. Could they truly rise against the powerful tide of skepticism, or would they be swallowed into the depths of self-doubt once more? The following morning, sunlight streamed into the garage, warm and reassuring, casting long shadows that danced across the concrete floor. Tom stood over a spread of tools and materials, his heart racing with the duality of excitement and fear. Today they were set to take the first concrete strides towards overcoming the spectral fears that had engulfed both him and Jake. "All right, buddy," Tom called out, glancing over his shoulder. Jake emerged, sleep still clinging to his eyes, but determination etched on his face. It pleased Tom to see that spark. It meant they were on the right path. "Let's prep for our first trial run." As they assembled the components, Tom felt an unexpected swell of pride. He caught himself thinking about how each piece, the metal, the sensors, the engine, was a metaphor for their journey. They were piecing together not just a rocket, but a relationship fortified by resilience and vulnerability. "Make sure you've got all the measurements right," Tom advised, trying to channel the mentor he aspired to be. With each adjustment he observed Jake make, he noted the lad's growing confidence, a glimmer of promise in his eyes when he effectively fitted the rocket's nose cone. Yet even amidst the small triumphs, a familiar fear gnawed at Tom's insides. What if failure hovered closer than success? "Dad?" Jake's voice broke his contemplation, light but threaded with doubt. "What if it doesn't launch? What if we just look foolish?" Tom took a moment, absorbing the boy's concern as shadows flitted across the walls. How many times had he brushed aside the very questions he now grappled with himself? "Jake, everyone who dares to create faces that fear," he said, his voice steady. "But do we allow skepticism to decide our fate? Or do we write our own story?" Jake nodded, though his expression remained uncertain. Tom saw the seed of struggle rooted deep within them both. The fear of inadequacy, the weight of comparison that only festered in silence. Today was not merely about a rocket. It had become a canvas for conversation, exploration, and togetherness. As they ventured into a straightforward procedure next, Tom felt empowered with purpose. Each turn of the screw echoed the tightening bond they were stitching. They discussed every part of the process, intertwined with personal anecdotes that Tom had kept buried for too long. "Did I ever tell you about my first project?" he asked, an unplanned urge to share stories bubbling up within him. "It was just a crude model of a car. I was so excited. And then, it didn't draft. It went sideways, and I felt so ashamed." "What did you do?" Jake asked, intrigued. "I went back to the drawing board. I learned why it failed, and that's what led me to the successes that followed. That experience taught me. Failure isn't the end. It's a bridge." Jake's pencil stopped on the notepad, and for the first time that day, Tom saw his boy's uncertainty begin to lift. But as they resumed their work, both were conscious of the judgment that loomed nearby. They could hear the whispers escalating from neighbors who viewed their attempts with skepticism. With every sound carried on the morning breeze, Tom felt his heart pound. A reminder of the thin line they were walking. "Let's test that stability now," Tom encouraged, redirecting his focus. "And remember, no matter what, this is not about anyone else." As they prepared for the rocket's first ignition, Tom's hands trembled slightly. He didn't only want success for the rocket. He wanted it for himself and Jake as well. This was a battleground, like the one they had imagined, but success hung precariously in the balance. As Jake reached for the ignition switch, Tom felt the weight of possibility lingering in the air. The moment was drawing near, but with it came the realization that failure was still a possibility. They could stumble at any moment, and with that came the deep-rooted fear of ridicule. "Are you ready?" Jake's voice was barely above a whisper, yet it rang with the power of shared resolve. "Ready," Tom replied, knowing full well the real test was not in the rocket itself, but in how they would embrace whatever followed. As Jake pressed the switch, a spark ignited, but suddenly a harsh, raspy sound filled the air, a sputtering that shocked them both. Tom watched in dismay as the rocket twitched, instead of rising like the phoenix he had envisioned. "Guys, did you honestly think it would fly?" A neighbor's jeer echoed over the fence, thick with mocking bravado. Tom's heart sank, but beneath it festered something raw and potent. Determination ignited by the sting of confrontation. What would come next would challenge everything about their shared journey. Would they capitulate to ridicule or rise against it, carving their own narrative amidst the noise? "Let's build it again," Tom asserted, his voice steadier than he felt, as Jake looked up with uncertainty transforming into purpose. But just as they turned to their work, a revelation whispered within Tom. The fear they were trying to overcome was intertwined with the very core of their experience. How deeply was he willing to expose his vulnerabilities to show Jake that resilience didn't begin and end with success? As doubts mingled with determination, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of their true journey. What lessons awaited as they confronted not just the mockery of others, but the deep-seated fears residing within their hearts? The tumultuous path ahead shimmered with uncertainty, but they would face it together, unwilling to retreat. In that moment, Tom sensed the flicker of a volatile mix of resolve and vulnerability, tethered to their journey. What would their next steps reveal, and would the true test of their will be found in the journey of recovery? Tom wiped the sweat from his brow, suddenly aware that the garage felt more like a stage than a workshop. The weight of judgment hung in the air, pressing down on him like a thick fog. The laughter from the neighbor made every component of the rocket feel heavier, as if it was now imbued with their scorn. "Jake," he said, anchoring his voice with the calm he desperately sought. "This isn't the end of our story. It's just another chapter. Remember what I told you. Failures are bridges. We learn, we adapt, we overcome." Jake's questioning glance pierced through the doubts swirling in Tom's mind. How could he reassure his son while battling his own insecurities? Each tick of the clock on the wall felt like a countdown to another failure. But beneath that uncertainty, Tom sensed a flicker of determination. "Okay," Jake replied, folding his arms as he stared at the sputtering rocket. "What's next?" They stood silently for a moment, the weight of their shared uncertainty filling the space around them. Instead of retreating from the embarrassment, Tom felt an urge to invite Jake closer into the heart of the project. This wasn't just about rockets. It was about showing Jake how to handle life's turbulence, to confront it head-on, rather than be crushed beneath it. "Let's analyze what went wrong," Tom suggested, quickly jotting down notes on a piece of paper. "What did we learn from that failure?" It didn't ignite properly?" Jake mused, his brow furrowing. "Exactly. Maybe we need more fuel, or to reposition the igniter. Tom felt energized. Each mishap they encountered demanded their attention, but it also invited them to innovate, to be creative. And remember this. Every engineer you admire has failed countless times. Jake's eyes sparkled, a mixture of curiosity and resilience. Here, within the remnants of their first attempt, lay the seeds for something bolder. Tackling the technical aspects, Tom engaged Jake in each decision, encouraging him to propose changes. A shift in angle, a new ignition method, a different fuel. Each suggested adjustment fostered Jake's budding confidence. It also ignited the flame of hope in Tom's heart. Let's modify the design to stabilize during launch, Jake suddenly declared, his voice cutting through the remnants of uncertainty like a blade. Yes, that's it, Tom replied, his exhilaration overtaking the embarrassment. They gathered materials to rework their design, and with each tool in hand, they shaped not only the rocket, but also a path forward, a blend of collaboration and learning. As they worked, the sun dipped into a muted gray, casting shadows that danced with a newfound rhythm. They shared laughs, moments of exasperation, and creative bursts that transformed their mistakes into triumphs. Tom listened as Jake excitedly narrated his dreams of space exploration. "Imagine if we got it to work," Jake said, his voice filled with conviction. "We'd become rocket scientists." "Or astronauts," Tom added, buoyed by the enthusiasm in his son's voice. But with fleeting joy came nagging doubt. Tom knew they were facing a fight against their internal skeptic much more than any external mockery. Facing the quiet desperation that lingered while they dismantled, redesigned, and rebuilt. The fear of ridicule had almost been rendered irrelevant by their shared resolve. That night, over a makeshift dinner at the workbench, Tom realized this was not merely a project. It was the relaunch of a connection with Jake that had faltered amid parental fears and the weight of expectations. Just as they finished cleaning up for the night, a moment of reflection washed over Tom. They had turned a failure into an invigorating experience. But was he wholly ready to tackle the fears still lingering beneath the surface? The doubts that threatened to wash away their progress? The sound of laughter echoed from the neighbor's backyard once more, followed by an exclamation about their failed rocket. With that, a singular thought struck Tom like lightning. This journey was not just about building a rocket. It was about building resilience and igniting ambition. "Next week, let's make sure it launches," Jake said, while a mischievous spark glinted in his eyes. "They won't see it coming." Tom smiled, focused on the evolving spirit of his son, but the specter of doubt still clung to his heart. How willing was he to withstand the next round of scrutiny, especially after pouring so much of himself into this? A steely resolve began to crystallize within him. They would have their success, but the true test was yet to come. How would they respond when the next failure knocked on their door again? With renewed determination, Tom stepped back, ready to embrace the upcoming challenges. The next phase loomed ahead, and with it sprawled an opportunity for growth, not just in their project, but in themselves. Would they rise to the occasion, or would the shadows chase them like a ghost? The next morning greeted Tom with the unmistakable scent of freshly brewed coffee, mingling with the lingering sense of potential that filled the garage. As he stretched and prepared for the day, a mix of excitement and trepidation washed over him. They had a task ahead, one that felt monumental not only for the rocket, but for the bond he was rebuilding with Jake. The previous night's determination pulsed in his veins, pushing him to face what lay ahead. Jake ambled in, a whirlwind of energy and imagination. "Dad, I read about rocket stabilization last night. We can use gyroscopes." His eyes gleamed with uncontainable enthusiasm as he spoke. "Gyroscopes?" Tom echoed, his heart racing. He had only brushed the surface of that concept in college. That's brilliant. But do you know how we would integrate that into our design? I think we could mount them around the center point. It'll help with balancing. Jake had already started to sketch a new design on a piece of scrap paper, excitement pouring out of him like an unstoppable fountain. Tom marveled at Jake's ingenuity. This wasn't just repeated information. Jake was synthesizing knowledge, demonstrating a level of creativity that he hadn't seen before. It struck Tom that while they worked on a rocket, Jake was also discovering himself. The prospect of doubling their efforts, of building together and nurturing Jake's instincts, became Tom's primary focus. "Let's take that idea and build it," Tom said, his voice buoyed by confidence. "But we have to think about how every piece connects. We need strategies, evaluations, plan our approach." As they dove into the project, the garage transformed into a laboratory of innovation. They encountered challenges, each one an opportunity masked as a frustration. With every misstep, they recalibrated, pushed boundaries, and sometimes, Tom saw a hint of impatience when things didn't go smoothly. But rather than shrink from these setbacks, he viewed them as moments of growth. "Maybe we should adjust the weight distribution too," Jake suggested, growing bolder with every trial. "Exactly. Let's also account for the angle of launch," Tom added, the momentum stimulating his professional instincts. Time passed unnoticed as they thrashed out equations and brainstormed solutions. Together, they began understanding physics, engineering, and most importantly, the value of resilience. Tom felt invigorated, free from limitations. Yet shadows of doubt flickered at the edge of his mind. As they assembled parts of the rocket, the harsh laughter from the neighbor's yard pulsed through the walls. It was a painful reminder of judgment, a self-inflicted tear in his burgeoning confidence. The easy mockery of failure sat heavy. Yet amidst these thoughts, something recalibrated inside him. "Jake," he called, suddenly yearning to address the specter of their neighbors head-on. "What do you think we ought to do if someone laughs at us again?" Jake pondered. "Well, we've already learned from our mistakes. If they laugh, maybe it means they're not ready to think big." A smile tugged at Tom's lips, warmth flooding his chest. "It's a reflection of their own fears, isn't it?" "Kind of like us." Jake laughed, his perspective brightening the garage. "We need to show them what we can do. Our rocket is gonna be incredible." Here was a profound revelation. They were redefining not just the rocket, but their own narrative. They were no longer just participants in a story. They were becoming the authors of their destiny. But as Tom reveled in this realization, another question loomed large. Could he fight against the societal expectations woven around his role as a father? A builder. In that moment, something within him solidified. He had spent too long cowering under the weight of others' perceptions. It was time to fully engage with their journey. "Let's gather more materials. Our next launch will be amazing. I know it," Tom declared, ready to embrace both the challenge and the excitement ahead. But as they shifted into action, a vibration of apprehension loomed. Failure felt not far from their grasp. The risk of embarrassment skulked behind every success. With everything they had built together at stake, Tom paused at the threshold of the garage. Would their next attempt lift both them and their dream? Or would specters of doubt coalesce once again, threatening to tear apart the resolve they had just forged? As the morning light brightened the garage, Tom's heart raced with a volatile mixture of anticipation and dread. Who would emerge from this relentless cycle of trial and error? The father he longed to be, or the man tangled in past failures? Tom took a deep breath, steadying himself against the swirl of anxieties that danced in his mind. The decision to forge ahead was nothing short of a leap into the unknown. Yet, the urge to push through the discomfort was stronger now than it ever had been. He and Jake gathered their supplies, the clink of metal pots and the rustle of plastic sheets, creating an energetic symphony in the garage. Each piece seemed imbued with potential, heightening Tom's resolve. But just as Tom started to feel that familiar thrill of possibility, memories of failed attempts crept into his thoughts. The last rocket launch had ended in disaster. He could still hear the neighbor's snickers, sharp and unforgiving. "What's next, Dad?" Jake asked, breaking Tom's moment of inner turmoil. His eyes sparkled with an eager anticipation that both inspired and unnerved Tom. "Let's sketch the overall layout first," Tom suggested, trying to mask his own trepidation with a layer of professionalism. "We need a strong foundation before anything else." As they worked together, sketching and discussing ideas, the dynamics between them shifted. Jake's natural curiosity invigorated Tom. The boy navigated through complex concepts with ease, each suggestion a testament to his growing intellect. Tom's initial apprehension about his own competence began to melt away, empowered by their collaboration. Yet, amid this burgeoning creativity, a thorn of doubt still nagged at him. "What if we get it wrong again?" he muttered, the words slipping out before he could catch them. "Then we try again," Jake exclaimed, unfazed. "Just like a video game, you don't quit when you lose a life, right?" Tom chuckled, but the implications hung heavily in the air. "You're right, kid, but sometimes it feels more serious than a game," he said quietly. "Why? We're learning, aren't we?" Jake challenged, a glimmer of determination flickering in his expression. The irony of the moment struck Tom. He had aimed to teach his son resilience, yet here was Jake, illuminating it back to him. This was not merely about building a rocket. It was about rebuilding something far more fragile. Their legacy, their shared narrative. "Okay, let's outline our plan with experiments," Tom proposed, eager to reshape the trajectory of both their project and their relationship. "We can document everything. Use photos, notes. We'll learn as we go." As they laid out their approach, Tom felt something shift within him. The scars of past failures began to fade as an understanding of fatherhood's unpredictability emerged. In this role, he wasn't just a teacher. He was a co-explorer, embarking on the same journey as his son. Later that week, their prototype took shape, becoming a physical manifestation of their collaboration, each notch and weld telling the tale of their ingenuity. Yet when the day of the trial launch arrived, Tom felt a familiar knot of fear tightening in his stomach. What if the neighbors gathered again to witness another failure? He could almost hear their laughter already. As they set up outside, a gust of wind swept through, rustling the papers that outlined their intended approach. In that moment, the stakes intensified. The rocket, a symbol of their joint efforts, seemed to gleam brightly against the muted backdrop of judgment and expectation. Tom's hand trembled slightly, reflection racing through him. Disregarding his growing anxiety, Tom focused on Jake. The boy's expression was a mirror of determination and excitement. This wasn't just Tom's moment. It was also Jake's. "Ready?" Tom asked, his voice steadying. "More than ready," Jake replied, igniting a fire in Tom's own heart. With a loud countdown echoing from Jake's lips, Tom stepped back, heart pounding not just with fear, but with something more potent: hope. As the countdown reached 0, he found himself caught in the flood of possibilities. Would they rise as they hoped, shattering the expectations laid on them? Or would the shadows descend once again, marking another attempt at failure? The moment had arrived, and amidst that electric tension, Tom realized this launch would reveal more than just the efficacy of their rocket. It would lay bare the evolution of both father and son, the very essence of their relationship unveiled in the face of the unknown. As the rocket began its ascent, Tom's breath caught in his throat, the thrilling question looming large. Would they soar, or would they crash? The rocket erupted with power, surging upwards with a blinding streak of orange and white. Tom's heart raced in tandem, a wild clash of exhilaration and trepidation. The beauty of the launch eclipsed all thoughts of doubt, if only for a moment. Watching Jake, eyes wide in wonder, was transformative. The boy's excitement was infectious, filling the air with a kind of hope Tom hadn't felt in years. Yet as the rocket ascended, so did the specter of their past failures. Each successful moment felt incandescent, but the shadows of potential failure flickered just out of sight. They had drawn up plans, studied dynamics, and assembled parts carefully. But what if this time was different? The pressure weighed heavily in Tom's mind. "Look at it go!" Jake shouted, his voice cutting through the fear swirling inside Tom. There was pure joy radiating from his son's demeanor, acting as a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. Tom allowed himself to smile. "Yeah, it is beautiful." The words slipped out, and for the first time he felt a flicker of pride. He might not control every outcome, but he was part of something that mattered. A shared dream that tethered him to Jake. Suddenly there was a flash. An explosion of color flared from the rocket, leaving a trail of smoke and fire. The trajectory seemed too steep. The moment stretched, unbearable. And then, as if defying fate, the rocket righted itself, stabilizing against the horizon. A wave of relief washed over Tom, but the knots in his stomach remained. "Is it going to make it?" Jake asked, a hint of worry seeping into his voice. "It looks good, kid," Tom replied, though his own uncertainty gnawed at him. As the rocket reached its apex, a sudden realization struck him like a bolt of electricity. Here, amidst the chaotic fallout of their efforts, lay an incredible truth. Failure was, and always had been, an integral part of growth. What he had misjudged in his own failures was that they defined neither him nor Jake. It was how they faced those failures together that wrote their true story. "I'm so proud of us," Tom said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice, looking straight at Jake. "Yeah." Jake beamed, his face alight with youthful optimism and belief. "Next time we'll go even higher." The rocket began its descent, and with it, Tom felt newfound clarity solidifying in his mind. The hesitance to fail no longer loomed as an antagonist. Instead, it had become a partner. If they could embrace every misstep as a lesson rather than a defeat, then what could be achieved? But just as their triumph began to settle like warmth in their chests, darkness swept in. The rocket, once a beacon of their combined aspirations, began to descend erratically, smoke spiraling out of control. "Oh, it's spinning!" Jake exclaimed, the vibrancy of their joy now replaced with an undercurrent of panic. "Hold on!" Tom shouted, rushing to stabilize the landing pad. His heart raced. This urgency transcended fear. It demanded action. As he focused on the task, something flickered deep within him, a determination igniting. They had already defied the odds once today. Perhaps they could do it again. In just a matter of seconds, the rocket crashed onto the grass, tumbling violently before a sudden hush enveloped them. Silence filled the air, thick with anticipation and fear. Tom glanced at Jake, whose expression flickered between disappointment and bewilderment. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, his voice steady though his heart pounded. Jake turned to him, eyes glistening. "We can fix it, right?" Tom hesitated. "That's the plan. We'll work on it together." With that simple response, a new truth emerged. Their journey would stretch beyond this launch. It was in the fixing, the perseverance, and the arduous path back from what seemed like a crash. As Tom surveyed the remnants of their creation, he realized this was not merely an experiment, but an illuminating experience. Not just as a father, but as a hopeful dreamer alongside his son. Then, a light flickered in the distance as something glimmered in the debris. A small metallic piece reflecting the sun. A forgotten connection. A strand of hope amidst destruction. "What's that?" Jake pointed, already moving toward it. Tom felt a surge of curiosity rise within him. This moment, this discovery. Could it be the start of something new? How would this unexpected find reshape their understanding of the launch and their dynamics moving forward? The questions danced tantalizingly around Tom's mind. As the truth between them grew fraught with revelations, one question remained. What did this piece mean for their future? Tom felt his heart begin to race as Jake sprinted toward the scattered remnants of their rocket, curiosity evident on his face. Yet, it was more than just the mystery of the shiny object that drew his attention. It was the realization that they were on the precipice of transformation, both as a father and a son. When Jake reached the metallic shard, he knelt down, carefully brushing away the bits of grass and dirt. "Dad, I think it's part of the stabilizer," he exclaimed, his voice resonating with a newfound excitement. "Bring it over here," Tom urged, shifting closer to examine the piece. It was then that he noticed the intricacies of the component, a design his late father would have appreciated for its ingenuity. "If that's true, we can incorporate it to improve our next design." Jake's eyes sparkled with determination as he joined him, the shadow of defeat lifting. "We can fix it, right?" He echoed what Tom had asked earlier, igniting a wave of hope within them. "Yes," Tom replied, "and fix it better than it was before." The words tasted invigorating on his tongue. The thought of innovation over despair resonated deeply, embodying the essence of growth that they had begun to cultivate together. As they worked side by side, reconstructing their ideas, Tom couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. The early fear of judgment, the struggles of overcoming doubt, each moment had formed them, an intricate tapestry woven from resilience and shared learning. Each step in this process not only strengthened their connection, but clarified something profound. Failure was not the end. It was foundational. Tom realized, in ways he had previously overlooked, that every setback contributed to their learning curve, building their skills and reinforcing their bond. As he observed Jake fervently sketching out new ideas based on the salvage part, Tom felt an unmistakable surge of pride. "Let's keep enhancing the rocket," he suggested, and watched with admiration as Jake nodded vigorously, sketching ideas for stability structures and ways to ensure a smoother launch next time. Their repair session became a testament to what they were capable of. They discussed materials, utilizing old theories about heat resistance and rocket mechanics that framed their father-son collaboration. With each conversation, Tom noticed Jake's confidence blossom, morphing the boy's once hesitant demeanor into a budding engineer's excitement. "This component will need its structure to be stronger," Jake proposed, adjusting his earlier sketches. "It can't just survive the flight, it must thrive." "That's exactly the way we should think about everything in life," Tom encouraged, impressed by Jake's perspective. "Life has its ups and downs, but we can always find ways to thrive through adversity." Hours passed quickly as they crafted their plan together, now transformed into a project of innovation and joint aspiration. In the midst of the construction, old fears of standing among neighbors faded into the background, replaced by a newfound clarity and purpose. What mattered now was not the approval of those beyond the walls of their garage, but what lay within the camaraderie they were building as a family. As dusk began to settle, Tom surveyed their progress. A mere husk of the rocket transformed into a vibrant symbol of their shared determination. Seeing Jake focused and fully immersed sparked an awakening within Tom, a quiet affirmation blooming in his heart. Together they were not just fixing a broken rocket. They were shaping an undeniable bond. "Tomorrow we can test it once again," but with our enhancements," Jake said, glancing up, eyes gleaming with optimism. "Absolutely. And when it launches next time, it won't simply be a display of our engineering. It will be a celebration of everything we've learned together." Tom smiled, assigning importance not only to their mechanical work, but to their shared transformation. When the letters from his father fell into Jake's hands, perhaps they had intended not just to inspire a lineage of scientific discovery, but to ultimately guide them back to the profound essence of family and perseverance. Tom felt lighter, the burdens of his previous uncertainties dissipating, replaced by a solid confidence, a recognition of his own growth as a father, a craftsman, and a believer in resilience. Alongside Jake, they were on the verge of something beautiful, and he finally understood. Acknowledging vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but a catalyst for true connection. As they closed the garage door at the end of a fruitful day, Tom felt like they had conquered their doubts and fears through the act of creation. A perfect metaphor for their lives. Each attempt, whether it ended in success or failure, propelled them forward, urging both father and son to confront the world together, unyielding. In that moment, Tom realized he had not only built a rocket, but had strengthened an invaluable partnership. They were ready for whatever lay ahead. With tomorrow's challenges on the horizon, their journey had only just begun. This was a testament not just to resilience, but to the unwavering bond formed through shared struggles and triumphs. Now was the moment for their stories to take flight, and Tom's heart soared with the possibilities. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.